Hi guys, I am back, ready to read chapter 2 of our book Escape from Alcatraz. If you remember that at the end of chapter 1, it was pretty much that the people in the prison had just realized that there were 3 prisoners missing, and nobody knows exactly what happened, but they kind of found some clues about how they escaped. So chapter 2 is called Life on the Rock. Frank Morris came to Alcatraz in January 1960 at 33 years old. He walked along the dock in handcuffs and leg irons, accompanied by guards. The boat waiting for him, the Warden Madigan, bobbed in the choppy water. Morris, other prisoners, and the guards boarded the vessel, and the skipper pulled away from the dock. Alcatraz Island lay on the horizon, more than a mile ahead of them. It would be a long way to swim in frigid water. Despite Morris's incarceration, he did not intend to stay long on Alcatraz. Morris was a robber, but what got him sent to Alcatraz were his many prison breaks. Before this, Morris had escaped from 11 prisons. Some men took up hobbies to pass the time in prison. Frank Morris hatched escape plans. Thinking about escape was the only way he knew to keep himself going. He needed something to hope for. The Warden Madigan docked at the island, and Morris got off the boat and boarded a waiting bus, his leg irons clinking as he walked. The bus hauled up a twisty, narrow road toward the beige prison at the top of the hill. Once there, Morris climbed up a set of stairs. At the top, a guard opened a gate to let him into a waiting room. Here, his chains were removed, and he was ordered to take off all his clothes. He stood naked as a doctor searched his body to make sure he wasn't smuggling anything in his ears, nose, or mouth. Morris was then taken through several doors and down a hallway between rows of cells. At every step of the way, he scanned the area for hints or ideas about a possible escape. Could a person slip through the vent? Could he file through those bars? Everywhere he looked, he saw guards. More guards than he had encountered in any other prison. In a basement shower room, he was ordered to wash up. He was given fresh clothes, including denim pants and a gray shirt, and led to his cell. There he received another set of clothes, as well as sheets, towels, a toothbrush, and other toiletries. Then he was left alone. Morris sat in the dark and listened to his new home. He heard someone playing a guitar in another cell. He heard some people chatting quietly, and he heard a whining sound. After some time, he realized it was the wind whipping across the island. Morris also looked out and cased his surroundings. There was a skylight. Was there any way to reach it? He watched the guards make their rounds, and he timed them. He noticed which guards were armed and which were not. Morris quickly got used to the dull routine on Alcatraz. In the recreation yard, inmates played softball, handball, chess, and other games. Men stood together in tight groups. It was cold outside, so each inmate was issued a heavy coat and a raincoat. Morris quickly got used... Cells were subjected to frequent, thorough searches called shakedowns. Officers came in and turned over the mattress, cleared off shelves, and carefully inspected every corner. Sometimes, without warning, an officer would come down the row of cells with a rubber mallet and hit each bar. If any bar made a duller sound than the others, he knew it had been tampered with, most likely filed or somehow cut. Guards made regular rounds, glancing into cells as the men read or painted or slept. Every convict and every guard in the place knew every sound. If you dropped something, everyone heard it and knew what it was. And if the guards heard anything unusual, they rushed over to investigate. It was clear that anything hidden would have to be tucked away very carefully. Any illegal work, such as cutting bars or digging concrete or making a tool, would have to be done silently and between guard rounds. Within a couple of weeks, Morris was given a job cleaning vegetables in the kitchen. He also got moved out of his temporary cell into a permanent one on cell block B. His neighbor in the next cell was Alan West. West had been in Alcatraz for 3 years when Morris showed up in 1960. The men already knew each other from their time in Atlanta, Georgia prisons before. Where Morris was quiet and thoughtful, West was a talker and a bragger. For that reason, Morris didn't care for him at first. Like Morris, West had escaped before and was considered a risk. That's why the men had been sent to Alcatraz. It was deemed impossible to escape from Alcatraz. After several weeks of cleaning vegetables, Morris got a new job as a library messenger. He delivered books and magazines to inmates throughout the prison. His next assignment was to the brush shop. There, he made brooms. This last job was a promotion and earned Morris some income, which he could spend on magazines, books, art supplies, even musical instruments. The job also earned him good time, meaning that the more he worked without getting into trouble, the more time was taken off his sentence. One of the worst things about life on the rock was the boredom. The daily routine never changed. Sometimes men would get in trouble just so they would be sent to the treatment unit or the TU. In TU, convicts were kept in their cells all day except for a shower and time alone in the yard. But at least it was different from the daily grind. The worst offenses earned prisoners a trip to the Hole, also known as a special treatment unit. In the Hole, prisoners had no privileges and never saw the light of day. They counted how many days passed by, the number of meals they were served. In October 1960, Morris saw another familiar face in the dining hall, John Anglin, another man he knew from the Atlanta prison. Just like Frank Morris and Allen West, he was considered an escape risk because he'd escaped other prisons before. John, or JW as he was known, came from a large, poor family. He'd committed most of his crimes in the company of his brothers Clarence and Alfred. They were robbers. Most recently, JW had been locked up in Leavenworth Prison in Kansas with Clarence. The two planned to escape in bread boxes that were being shipped out, but a guard noticed how hard it was for the men to lift a box and ordered it opened up. Inside, he found Clarence. JW was then sent to Alcatraz for his part in the plot. Clarence was sent to isolation block in Leavenworth. 2 months later, he was also sent to Alcatraz and assigned a cell next to JW. The authorities believed it would be good for the two men to be close together so they could talk about family matters. They didn't have any concerns that their brothers would be able to escape. The rock, after all, was inescapable. According to Clarence Carnes in a later interview, an escape plan began to brew in Morris's mind soon after the Anglins arrived. The first thing that got him thinking was a story he heard from his neighbor, Allen West. West had told Morris about another convict who did electrical work up above cell block B years ago. The electrician had removed a fan motor from a vent shaft, and it had never been replaced. Except for the barred grill across it, the shaft was open. Morris tucked this information away. He didn't have a safe way to get out of his cell and into the shaft, at least not yet. Then he made another discovery. The concrete walls that made up the cells were corroded. They could be scraped through over time with nothing more than a nail clipper, spoon, or other common utensil. How much could he dig before it would be noticeable? How could he hide it? Other questions popped up. How big of a hole would he need to get through? How long would it take? Who, if anyone, should he invite to the plan? And suppose he got through the concrete, then what? How would he get through the air shaft? How would he get off the island? He saw for himself how far it was to the mainland. Swimming there would be foolish. By the time he made it, if he made it, he'd be exhausted, confused, and hypothermic. He'd have no civilian clothes. He'd have no dry clothes at all. He'd have no money, no food, and no transportation. There was a lot to figure out, but the plan had begun to take hold. The seed of hope had been planted. And then there's a picture here that says it's a typical cell block view on Alcatraz. So let me see if I can hold that up so y'all can see it. Just the row, long row of cells. Okay, and that's the end of chapter 2. So now we know a little bit more about the men who escaped or who were part of the escape and kind of what they were thinking in the beginning. Seems like a pretty big feat to accomplish there in a prison that was considered to be inescapable. So I'm excited to see what happens next. So look for the chapter 3 video later this week. See you guys.